at least another half hour of business, but both Councilman Rizal and I left early without breaking quorum, so we can get started, because I know you're already an hour late. And the city attorney just let me know that many of you have families to get to, children to pick up, seniors to pick up. Life goes on. I understand it. And more because of a conflict issue, we're going to take some items out of order so that we can address the concerns of the city attorney, and I want to make sure we facilitate and support her in that effort as well. That being said, just give me 3 or 4 more minutes to make sure I'm in sync with the city clerk and the city attorney, and then we have everything in order. So give me 2 or 3 more minutes and we'll get going. Thank you very much. And again, thank you for your patience. Okay, folks. We do have several items on the agenda, as you well know. It's a special day of sorts in that we have a couple of individuals that we need to approve as a committee and to recommend to the council. And let me just go through the agenda really fast. We have specials on items 1, 6, and 7 based on cards. And we do have 2, like I said, individuals will be reviewing. It's on 1 and 2. On 3, I know we can move to adopt. And I believe the staff on 3, do we have any conditions we can approve as is? I'm assuming that's the case? Okay. Item 4 is consent. Do we have conditions on number 4? If we do, can we read them into the record? As modified. So we'll leave it as modified. Item 5 as well as modified. And so we'll remove those items. So it is as was item 1, 2, 6, and 7. And so let's stay with item number 1. And you know what? I beat the CLA over here. So do we have CLA? Okay, I'll read it into the record. And I'll do what they typically do. It's a communication from the mayor relative to the appointment of Mr. Michael LeGrand as the permanent director of planning for the Department of City and Planning. Mr. LeGrand, would like to come on up, please? Well, first I want to thank you for your hard work and you've been growing up, as I might say, in your career in the city, in different departments. But I do want to take a moment to thank Gail Glover for her hard work and the orientation that she gave to the department and being much more inclusive with the notion of community plans and addressing the question of what is real planning and taking the necessary steps to implement those types of programs and policies. But I also know that you've been picked by the mayor and the staff to fill that position, and I want to congratulate you on that achievement. But if you would like to, please give us some comments about this appointment, what you see. And Councilman Rousseau, if you have any questions of him at this time, and that maybe we can incorporate into his presentation.
Sure. I just want to congratulate you. I think you bring to this position a wealth of experience and knowledge about how to get things done. I worked with you for about 4.5 years, and you were a troubleshooter, so to speak, for us when we had issues and clarifications we needed either from the planning process or when something seemed to get jammed in a bottleneck. So I think you're the right person for the job, and next to public safety and keeping our finances in order, your job, in my view, is one of the most important as we plan our city, as we think about what the city looks like for us, not only now, but in the future. And it really hits at the core of quality of life issues for our residents. So it's a tremendous responsibility. I think you understand the importance of not only working within these walls at City Hall, but the importance of having community involvement and participation as we move forward. And as you give your remarks, I'm very interested in hearing what are your 2 or 3 top priorities as you take on this position. So thank you and congratulations.
Without further ado, Mr. LeGrand.
Thank you, council members. You brought up a lot of great points today. I'm very excited to be appointed by the mayor and to be before you today for the confirmation. Some of the things that are really exciting about the future of the planning department is we actually have a history of doing some excellent plans in the department, from the center's concept to our general plan framework to our recent work on our community plans. The one thing that I plan on doing as soon as this appointment goes through is actually continuing that work. We've really done a great job of raising the level of discussion in the community regarding urban planning and advanced planning and the different things that the planning department could bring to the table for neighborhood protection, for quality of life issues, for public spaces, and for really getting jobs in Los Angeles. And so one of the things I'm really excited about is the staff we have working in the planning department. We have some of the best planners in the nation that chose to work for the city of Los Angeles. And with that staff, we're here to work with the council and the mayor to bring forward a vision of a city that can actually grow, but grow smartly, that can actually meet with the different various constituencies in the city and have a place to bring those discussions. One of the things we like to say is that the planning process brings solutions, but it also brings different stakeholders to the table. And one of the things I look forward to is working with our various constituents, various neighborhood groups, to hear what their community brings, what are the unique fabrics of their community that we can actually help preserve, what are the things we can enhance. We're also facing a very tough time in the department where our staff's currently under furloughs. We've had an early retirement program that we've lost a lot of staff. We have some very tough budget years ahead of us and a few behind us. So as we move forward, looking at ways to help fund some of our planning activities, to save those precious general fund dollars for our vital services, but also make sure we preserve our advanced planning program, that we're able to create vibrant neighborhoods. We're also able to get our commercial corridors and plan for the transit. We have Measure R that was recently passed. One of the things I'd like to work with this committee on, the mayor's office on, is really reshifting our agenda for advanced planning, looking at where we know that the transit's going, we know where the nodes are going to be, we're aware where the stations are going to be, but plan our public spaces around those areas, make sure we have wide sidewalks, make sure we have abundant landscaping, that there's shade, that we have commercial uses that are vibrant, that enhance the pedestrian environment, so that when this transit improvements come through, the plans are in place. Right now, we don't have those plans in place. So we need to really look forward to working collaboratively with the various stakeholders and the various community groups, the development community, the business community, the different neighborhood councils, on coming forward with plans that everyone's a part of and everyone has a voice at the table.
Well, how can I put this? The one factor that I see in all of our department heads, and you have 15 different districts and the mayor, and they're all asking for your attention and your support. And so that is going to be a very challenging balancing act. I think, and I agree with Councilman Rousseau, I appreciate all your hard work in the role that you've had in the department, But now as the point person, as the planning director, the stage will change for you. One of the priorities, I would say, is in the bigger picture, looking at this notion of one city. There have been many studies that speak to the tale of two cities. And the planning department has one department in the past 40 years where you can see, literally, track where resources go and where they don't. And I know because in 88, 89, I tracked down every motion for 1 year. I charted out every motion to see where it was spent in terms of resources and staff and actual products and policies. It led to a Zucker report, which spoke to these inequities. And now it's 20 years later. And we're still talking about community plans, and we're still talking about significant issues, and they're all important. But on the horizon, the discussion on food deserts, it's about the health of our communities who don't have a place to go to have a nutritious meal at a time when this city's children are experiencing extraordinary levels of obesity and a different now category of diabetes. We have a river master plan that goes from the most wealthiest neighborhoods to the poorest neighborhoods, and we have a riverfront district that can stimulate not only a way to create a facelift for the city, but create relief for all of the neighborhoods that make up the great diversity of the city. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. You got the Cleantech corridor, you got issues of I can go on and on from the west side all the way through the valley down to the east side, down to South LA. And I share these thoughts with you because we need to inspire our staff to understand the role they have, and through their leadership and the management to actually go and embrace that energy. And that's a commitment from me to you that I'll work hard to create that environment. So that being said, I want to welcome Councilman Cocoon. We try to make this painless possible transition from council to here. I don't know they were still going on, and we would get here without breaking quorum. So welcome. We have before us the candidate selected by the mayor to become the new planning director. Do you have any thoughts or observations for the candidate? Okay. Well, now's a good time, because what we'll do is we'll express, if you can ask your questions now, then I'll ask for public cards and then we'll vote. So it's please.
Welcome and congratulations on your appointment. As you know, I chair the Education and Neighborhoods Committee and work closely with our neighborhood council system throughout the city. And many of the neighborhood councils have felt that they have not been full participants in the process of helping to shape the future plans of their communities and to control development in their communities in a way that's consistent with the needs and the limitations of those communities. How would you envision the relationship of the planning department and the neighborhood council system under your watch?
One of the fortunate things about the neighborhood councils is due to charter reform, we have a great built-in infrastructure of participation. What we've been doing in the planning department is spending a lot of our time working with these groups, many times at Congress of Neighborhood Councils, working with a lot of their land use chairs on really helping not only have them educate us on their role and the different things they see in their environment, but also educating them on our process and the different ways for them to interact successfully with the planning department in the city. But beyond that, one of the things I've noticed is with the lack of having good plans in place in Los Angeles, there tends to be a project-by-project planning going on, and the neighborhood councils and many times are bombarded by having to respond to a project rather than spend that energy doing an advanced plan that will basically shape the city for the next 20 years and talk about the things they want to see in different developments, whether it's a new retail center going in their neighborhood or a transit stop that we're putting in, what kind of public spaces they want to see, what are their park needs, what are the infrastructure needs in the neighborhood. traffic issues. So getting those issues on the table, but also looking at them for the future so that when development does come, they know what is expected, and they know from the development side that what the contract with the community is, what sort of density is appropriate for their neighborhood, what are their issues in that neighborhood. Is it parking that they may have a concern with, that they need to have projects provide more parking to help alleviate some of the congestion? So working really closely with the neighborhood councils to understand what their vision is for their neighborhood and incorporating that in our advanced planning tools.
And along those lines, given the very limited resources that are now available to the department, to the entire city, what's the most effective way to ensure that our specific plans are kept up to date in a way that keeps with the changing nature of neighborhoods in an era when we have such limited resources?
Yeah. Luckily, in this last fiscal year, the department was able to bring forward to council, and the council approved a small surcharge on all applications that would go to fund the general plan, community plan maintenance program. So we have an infusion of some money every year coming into the department to keep some of those vital services going. But I think one of the things we need to do is also look at the different kinds of applications we process in the planning department and making sure that those aren't a burden on the general fund, that those are being paid for by the people applying for those applications, and that we have a full cost recovery system so that our policy program and our advanced planning program can use those precious general fund dollars and also be supported somewhat by fees, but trying to shift the burden of the side of our department who processes entitlement applications onto the people who are asking for those entitlements, rather than having it be mixed and carried by the general fund. I think that will actually shore up our advanced planning program so we respond to, not all the time, not as fast as many times the council would like, but in a productive manner do the outreach that it takes to bring those plans up to date in your districts.
Our city is straining right now because of growth and because of impacts on an aging infrastructure, water infrastructure, power, transportation infrastructure, all under great strain. And at the same time, we have a clear need for more housing in this city. So how do you strike the balance and how do you deal with it in a citywide basis when there are different communities within the city with very different needs, very different current densities, very different infrastructure capacity, different characters? How do you do that? What's your vision for how you strike that appropriate balance?
The best way to strike that balance is through our advanced planning, basically preparing for our infrastructure needs, identifying where we have necessities, requiring in some cases impact fees to help get that. So when you do see new development come along, people know this area needs a fire station, for example. They may know also that there's some old sewer capacity that needs to be updated, so that when we do see growth in the city, that we're making sure that it's paying for and supporting the infrastructure needs that are basically required under state law. Many times in Los Angeles, we tend to allow for projects to come through and we mitigate the impacts of those projects, but in terms of our overall infrastructure, I think we've done a poor job in the past of really identifying what the future needs are for the city. So working in collaboration with the Bureau of Engineering, Department of Transportation, and Building and Safety, coming to the table with studies that show, for example, we have an annual growth and infrastructure study that shows where the city is going for the future, but also looking at nexus studies so that when we do see growth happen, like you mentioned, housing developments coming along, we make sure that we have the capacity for those and that they're actually paying for that capacity, and that money's going directly earmarked to those projects to build things like fire stations or libraries where they're needed because of the growth that we're going to be accommodating.
Thank you.
So it's a long working process, but we're making great strides.
I'm going to go to the public.
Thank you. Yes, okay. And again, what I appreciate about the question, Councilman Murray, is the notion of asking the question to our constituents is, where does housing go? And I think the line of question that you provided gives us a sense of the challenges we have, and I appreciate that very much. Ms. LeBron, we'll go through public comment, and if anything is raised, any questions, we'll ask you to come back, and then we'll take our action.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Our first person on public comment is Diane Gisman. Come on up. Then we have Ann Williams, Manuel Weiss. Good afternoon, sir. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Daniel Gritzman. I chair the Land Use Housing Construction Committee for the Los Angeles Area Chamber of Commerce. I'm here today to support the confirmation of Michael LeGrand as the next Director of City Planning and urge the Council to confirm him as soon as possible. Over the last decade, I've had the privilege of working closely with Mr. LeGrand in a number of his roles in the Planning Department. In each instance, he has demonstrated not only a keen sense of responsibility for the department's stewardship of our city's built environment, but also a clear cognizance of the economic engine that is supplied by our city's planning function. He is also a realistic problem solver that understands goals and finds efficient and effective ways to advance those goals in a manner that is more common in the private sector than in government. He has been a fair mediator of community concerns, planning policy, and economic realities, working with all stakeholders towards solutions that are in the city's best interest. Many in the business community are ecstatic about Mr. LeGrand's appointment as the Director of Planning. The appointment signals clearly that the Planning Department is open for business. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next speaker. Good afternoon, Ms. Williams.
Good afternoon. I'm Ann Williams with the Central City Association. Among the Central City Association's 450 members are the top real estate developers, land use attorneys, and real estate investors working in the city of Los Angeles. And on behalf of our membership, I'm pleased to speak in support of the appointment of Michael LeGrand as the Planning Director. He has great institutional knowledge of the city and the internal workings of the planning department, which is particularly important in a department that has lost so much of its most experienced staff recently. He's also been proactive in reaching out to the private sector, which is one of the few pieces of our local economy that has a real ability to get moving again and bring jobs and economic activity back to the city. So CCA and our many members in the land use and development industry look forward to continuing our strong working relationship with the Planning Department under Mr. LeGrand's leadership. Thank you.
Thank you. Noel Weiss.
Good afternoon. I'm here to vigorously support Michael LeGrand's nomination and confirmation. Michael is, as far as I'm concerned, exceedingly well qualified for this position. I would say, however, in response to Mr. Reyes' comments, again, I go back to probably one of Mr. Huizar's finest moments on the City Council, April 10th, 2007, when he rhetorically asked, and what is the housing policy of the City of Los Angeles? Unfortunately, 3 years later, we still don't have an answer. I think Michael LeGrand, with his experience, can facilitate the ability to get that answer, but in the end, it's not the planning director. This is a treasure hunt, people. I believe, honestly, we're mining for, the answers are there, we're mining for those gold nuggets. But it comes down to the policymakers. You people on the City Council, you have to give him the tools. He's basically the chief scout. Going forward, I think you need to respect the fact that hopefully he will tell you what you don't want to hear, and that you will encourage him to be able to do that so that we can get an honest dialogue, we can get the kind of openness and transparency so that we can get the debate, the discussion that's needed to begin to answer Mr. Huizar's question. What is that policy, and what should it be, and why should we have it? Finally, I just want to give a little bit of an anecdote, because I've read disparaging comments about Michael, a lapdog for the developer, this, that, and the other. People know that I've done a lot of work on behalf of tenants, and I will say that there is in the condo conversion, 1295.2, the planning department basically enforces those tenant mitigation conditions. Michael went out of his way, and I think one of his finest moments is in his capacity as zoning administrator, he did convene a mediation in order to basically get those people those relocation benefits to which they were entitled. And I got to tell you, it wasn't anybody in the council staff that did it. It was Michael LeGrand that did it, and that happens quite often. And many times when I would be meeting with Michael, coming out would be Greg Lasson going the other way as I went in. So he's basically trying to cover both ends. He's open-minded, and I think he'll do a great job, and I hope that, again, you do listen to what he has to say. Thank you.
Thank you. We have following speakers: Mitch Chemers, Jessica Duboff, and Ron Gruber. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, committee. My name is Mitch Chemers. I'm here to support Michael LeGrand to be confirmed as a planning director. While interacting with Michael LeGrand, I've observed that he's been highly engaged and solution-oriented. I represent a lot of small businesses throughout the city, and I'd be proud to see Michael LeGrand continuing to bring his leadership skills to bear. It's important that we have an engaged and solution-oriented person like Mr. LeGrand, and I believe that with his extraordinary leadership abilities, we'll see a lot of improvements, and I urge this committee to confirm him. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Our next speaker.
Good afternoon. My name is Jessica Duboff. I'm here on behalf of the Los Angeles Area Chamber of Commerce and our 1,600 members in support of Michael LeGrand as Director for Planning for the Department of City Planning. Mr. LeGrand's extensive experience in multiple aspects of planning provides him with the knowledge and relationships necessary to lead the department in charge of envisioning land use and future development in Los Angeles. A project's financial viability depends on the time it takes to move through the city's bureaucracy. His goals to streamline the planning and permitting process will serve as another step towards a smart growth climate, keeping businesses vital to our economy here and encouraging new businesses to open their doors in Los Angeles. The Chamber looks forward to the opportunity to continue working with Mr. LeGrand as Director of Planning. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. And our final speaker, please give your name and address.
Good afternoon, council members. LaRon Gubler, President and CEO of the Hollywood Chamber of Commerce, here to strongly support the recommendation to appoint Michael LeGrand to this position. We have worked with him for many years. We found him to be knowledgeable. He knows the landscape. He can hit the ground running. There won't be any downtime in his getting up to speed. And it's great to see someone from within the department who has these skills, who can step up and continue the momentum of the reforms that Gail Goldberg began. We've always found him to be open and accessible, but I think one of the strongest points in his favor is that he is a problem solver. Just one example, the last several months we've been working with the department to try to find a way to streamline the process of renewing routine CUPs within the city. And it was thanks to Michael's efforts that we were able to find a solution that's going to benefit small businesses as well as will benefit the city by not being clogged up with these routine cases. So I think that's one great example. He's going to do a great job. We urge his appointment. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And now, our real final speaker is Edgar Colotti.
Thank you very much. My name is Edgar Colotti, and I'm a land use attorney with Paul Hastings and chair of VICA's Land Use Committee. I am here on behalf of VICA to express our strong support for the confirmation of Michael LeGrand as a director of the City Planning Department. As the mayor recently wrote in his letter to the City Council nominating Mr. LeGrand, my decision to appoint Michael LeGrand is a reflection of the significant changes I want to effectuate in making the planning process easier and more transparent. Mr. LeGrand, that's the end of the mayor's quote, Mr. LeGrand has the innate ability to work with community stakeholders to address our concerns while moving the right development projects forward. VICA believes that Mr. LeGrand has the ability to help maintain the city's residential neighborhoods while balancing the benefits of development throughout the entire city. Like the mayor, VICA is very impressed with Mr. LeGrand's track record while serving as the planning department's chief zoning administrator, as well as his more than decade service to the city. Mr. LeGrand's goals include updating community plans and bringing more transparency to the planning and development process. Based on experience with the city, VICA believes he will succeed. His list of accomplishments is significant, and VICA believes that his strong background within the City of LA Planning Department will be a great asset to our city. VICA has worked with Mr. LeGrand during his tenure with the city and considers him an exceptional choice to head the planning department. Thank you, and we recommend his approval.
Oh, thank you, sir. Mr. LeGrand? So we've heard Mr. LeGrandi, Mr. LeGrand, Mr. LeGrand. Please give us your proper pronunciation.
LeGrand.
LeGrand.
Yes.
Now, there's grand in there. That means pretty big, right? Like grand. Is that what we expect in the future?
Yeah, we have big plans for the city council.
Okay. I'd like to recommend Mr. LeGrand for planning director. Have a second?
Second.
And it looks like it's unanimous? Yes. Mr. LeGrand will be seeing you in council.
Thank you very much.
And more than likely tomorrow, correct? Scheduled for tomorrow. Congratulations, sir. One round of applause, Mr. LeGrand. Okay, one round and two to go. Okay, and our next, item number 2.
Item 2, Councilman, is the reappointment of Mr. Victor Cuevas to the Board of Building and Safety Commissioners.
Mr. Cuevas. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
I'm sorry we couldn't meet earlier. As you know, we were stuck in council. But can you share a little bit about yourself, and tell us the position that you're being appointed?
Well, I'm an urban planner by training. I see one of my classmates from graduate school over here, Caro, in the back. I do have legislative experience and construction experience. I've been there for 2 years, and I think I've done a good job.
So it's your reappointment to building and safety.
Correct.
Any questions from Mr. Cuevas? Just want to say thank you, sir, for your contribution to the city and your hard work, and we would recommend you for reappointment. Thank you, sir. It's a unanimous vote. Thank you very much. Okay, Roberto, next.
Next, Councilman, is a motion on Cardenas. It's asking Planning and DOT to prepare a general plan amendment and a downgrade to Century Boulevard, and this is for the Jordan Downs project in CD 15.
I think I moved to adopt that one already.
Wait, okay.
So we move on 3, 4, and 5, and I think we can go to 7. I understand that would be to comment, I guess. We can do number 7 first, and then we'll go from there. So item number 7?
Sure. Item 7, Councilman, is an appeal by Crescent Management. This has to do with various land use entitlements, a conditional use, and modification as to the height requirement, and it has to do with the expansion and construction of a new private school in CD 5.
In District 5, okay. Staff, we have a staff presentation on this? We have a planning director, we must have planning staff, right? Uh-oh. We don't have planning staff. Oh, there they are. Vince, where are you, Vince? Okay. Good afternoon, man. I know it's been a long day, so.
Thank you so much. As indicated, this was an appeal that was filed regarding an approval made by the City Planning Commission on March 11th, 2010. It was a conditional use request for a private nursery school and a private kindergarten in a residential zone. Additionally, there were modification requests attached to the request. Those modifications were for side yards, for fence height, and for actual building height. All of these requests were actually adopted by the Commission at their March 11th, 2010 meeting. The project site is the Yeshiveth Terath Emeth School. It is located basically a block south of Melrose Avenue and a block east of La Brea. There are multiple buildings as part of the school campus. There's an elementary school, a boys' high school, and a girls' school. The subject site is currently a child development center. So the conditional use request would be to replace that child care facility with a larger and more updated facility. Part of the approval by the City Planning Commission included some basic conditions that they developed with regard to school uses.
I'm sorry, Arlinda, can you just give us the difference in size?
In size?
In terms of proportions, we're asking for bigger classrooms, a bigger building. Can you be a little bit more specific about that?
Actually, what they're asking for is a new facility. The current facility will be torn down, a new facility will be built. The number of students will not change that will be in the school. There'll be 120 children at the new facility. Initially, 180 were proposed, and they brought that back down to 120.
Okay, thank you.
Some of the conditions of approval that were attached to the conditional use are pretty basic. These were conditions that were developed by the City Planning Commission, and they address carpooling, they address pickup and drop-off of children, they address noise considerations. This particular project was conditioned to have a community relations person attached so that communication could continue with the immediate neighborhood. Also, they were required to do a parking monitoring program, also a circulation program, and ultimately a compliance review program. 1 year after their C of O, or certificate of occupancy, is obtained, they will need to come back to the city to be sure that they are in compliance with these conditions of approval. To move on to the subject appeal, there were 4 areas primary in the appeal that I would like to quickly go over. The first being that the applicant should be barred from obtaining a conditional use permit because of non-compliance of the existing CUPs for the other school sites. As I indicated, this is a multi-site campus. At the time of this particular conditional use and approval, I did staff did a review, and there were no compliance issues. There were no building and safety code compliances outstanding on any of the sites at that time. At the public hearing, or the community, the commission meeting, it was brought forward that there were issues that the community thought that required parking was not being provided adequately at the other locations that the school operated. The commission president was very much concerned with that. The council representative at the time came forward and indicated that they would be willing to work with the school and the community to iron out any issues that may have arisen on these other sites with regard to non-compliance of parking issues. I'm not sure how that has developed, but I just did another recent review, and there was one parking code violation or code compliance issue, and it had been addressed and closed. Okay, the next issue that was brought forward as part of the appeal is with regard to the traffic impacts. It was indicated that the traffic impacts were not analyzed appropriately. As part of the environmental review, the traffic analysis was sent to the Department of Transportation. Their recommendation was that there were no significant impacts identified from the subject use. So any mitigation that was required would have been included in the conditions of approval, but because there were no significant issues identified by DOT or by the traffic study, there are no specific parking or transportation mitigations associated with this particular case. Those were the 2 primary issues brought forward in the appeal. The outstanding or potential for outstanding conflict of this conditions of approval on the other school sites, and an inadequate, perhaps, transportation analysis. There was one correction, however, that needed to be made to the determination that was issued. There were changes brought forward at the City Planning Commission meeting, and one of those changes was a deletion of a requirement that would require staggered start times for the school. That should have been deleted, and it was not deleted. So we would ask that that conditional approval be deleted, because it actually has the effect of elongating the amount of time that parents are out there picking up students and creating potential traffic hazards. And that's basically an overview of the appeal.
In terms of the assertion that the Planning Commission erred by using the general plan provision governing the improvement of a school structure and using that same provision and applying it to a daycare facility, does that assertion stand in your research and your analysis? Does that assertion have any bearing or any weight?
Actually, it does not. There is no general plan compliance finding required as part of this action. This is a request for a conditional use permit. The zone in which the use is going to be located is consistent with the general plan, so there's no consistency issue there. The zone requires that this particular use would only be allowed through the conditional use process, and that's what was obtained. It was two separate conditional uses, one for the nursery school use and one for the kindergarten use. So there is no general plan inconsistency or consistency issue.
Thank you. Any questions from my colleagues for our planning staff?
Not now.
Not now, then we'll go through a public comment. Cards, thank you. Linda? Are there any? Yes.
Councilman, are you going to hear from the appellant?
No, I should do that, shouldn't I? That's a good idea. Let's hear from the appellants. That's what we're supposed to do. Sorry, folks. Let's call up the appellants, please. Appellants on record.
Good afternoon. Harry Rebune, counsel for the appellants.
And you're the first one I was going to call up, actually.
Good afternoon. Harry Rebune, counsel for the appellants. We find ourselves in a difficult situation today. The original appeal was filed on May 10th, 2010, and that was circulated. We made a supplemental submission of portions of the Planning Commission record, which we filed on July 25th. We filed 12 sets. We made a supplemental submission of brief with exhibits filed on July 25th, a brief by another appellant. We filed exhibits in support of that brief on July 25th. Apparently those didn't find their way into the commission packet. We submitted them today shortly before the hearing, and I believe the 12 sets were brought up and distributed, but I don't know if you've had an opportunity to review that. My preference really would be to, I don't know, I guess we have no standing to request a continuance, but they're voluminous materials, and I couldn't possibly sit here and just read them into the record. We'd all grow old.
Let me ask the city attorney, what are our options? Are you asking for a continuance?
I would very much appreciate one, yes.
Can you give us our options here, ma'am?
Terry Kaufman, Messiah City Attorney's Office. There's a time limit to act on an appeal of a conditional use permit, and the only way that time limit can be extended is with the agreement and concurrence of the applicant and this committee. So if the applicant is agreeable to a continuance and it's this committee's wish to do so, it may, but it isn't a situation where the appellant gets to insist on a continuance. He does have the option to summarize the materials that are presented.
Okay. Well, colleagues, I know my staff reviews the material. We go through the analysis, and but you're saying that your material was not submitted in time to the staff to review?
It was submitted July 25th, which was timely. I believe there was a clerical error on the part of staff, which prevented the committee from receiving it until today.
Now, when you refer to commission, are you referring to commission or to the committee?
My apology, the committee, I'm sorry.
Committee. Well, colleagues, I would leave it to your discretion. I'm flexible in terms of, as indicated by the city attorney, if the applicant, which is Mr. How do you pronounce your last name?
Ribune.
As the applicant is asking for continuance?
He's the appellant.
The appellant, I'm sorry.
So it's not, it is, anybody has standing, if you want to put it that way, to request a continuance, but the only party that can grant the continuance and agree to it in this case is the applicant.
Let me ask the applicant then, Ms. Rabin, if you don't mind. And please introduce yourself.
George Milson, Latham Watkins, representing Yeshiva Torath Emeth. We represent them on a pro bono basis. We believe this is an important use. We'd like the matter to be heard today. It is a time limit file, and we would ask that you hear this matter today.
Okay.
Thank you.
So that will be how we continue forward, sir. So please give us your reason for appealing.
Well, I did observe some people reading the brief. Let me address the points made by the staff, and I'll just highlight the issues we raised.
If you can be as brief and as concise as possible, we would appreciate that.
Thank you. In terms of there being no non-compliance issues, what happened at this, what we have here is parking areas fenced off for playgrounds, parking areas fenced over for playgrounds, parking areas fenced off for other reasons, and they're simply not used for parking. This was brought up to the Planning Commission, and it was argued by the neighbors opposing grant of the application that, listen, conditional use permit after conditional use permit and certificate of occupancy after certificate of occupancy granted to this applicant has mandated provision of parking spaces, provision of loading and unloading zones. None of them have been honored. It would not be right to grant the applicant yet one more conditional use permit in light of these violations. What happened was Mr. Koritz's deputy intervened at the end of the hearing and stated that Mr. Koritz would bring the weight of his office personally to bear to assure compliance in the future, and that need not be a concern. I just would like to advise you that subsequent to the Planning Commission hearing, the city inspector went out with advance notice, and spaces were brought into compliance and cars were parked in there. And after the city inspector left, the spaces were no longer used as parking. They went back to their prior use. And when the city inspector was called by the neighbors again to come out because they had reverted to the illegal use, the city inspector refused to come out, saying that the matter had been closed. But there has been a consistent pattern of disregard of every obligation under prior certificates of occupancy, under prior conditional use permits. That continued subsequent to the Planning Commission hearing, and that renders applicant untrustworthy, and we cannot grant another conditional use permit and just go through this again. At some point when there's good faith compliance, it would be appropriate to act. It's not that point today. Number two, as far as the traffic impact issues, the staff report indicated that there are 120 students in the school, that the number isn't increasing, so there are no traffic or parking issues. As explained in the supplementary brief and the exhibits filed, the daycare license issued by the city permits a maximum occupancy of 76 children in the building, and we have to assume that there are 76 children in the building. The conditional use permit authorizes 120 children. As such, there's a 50-something% increase in occupancy, and that does impact traffic and parking, and it merits an appropriate traffic report. We raised some other issues.
If we can begin to
as far as consistency with the general plan, The staff report indicated there need not be consistency with the general plan, or that there is consistency, or that it's irrelevant. Please be advised that the staff report to the Planning Commission made a specific recommendation for finding consistency with the general plan based on expansion of a school structure, and this is not a school structure. There was also a requirement for a full traffic impact study issued in the early 1990s once the enrollment of the applicant exceeded a certain number of students. That threshold was reached. A full traffic impact study was required. It was not performed. It was waived. That was a firm requirement put in writing back in the 1990s, and it remains. Next, we did bring up in the supplementary brief, and this was unknown at the time of the commission hearing, the chairman of the commission, Mr. Roshan, his architectural firm Roshan and Van Cleve, designed one of the yeshivas, the applicant's buildings. We believe this was an appearance of impropriety or an appearance of conflict of interest. We believe, based on the ethics requirements under the law of the City of Los Angeles, Mr. Roshan was obligated to disqualify himself, and we ask that at a minimum this be redecided by a panel of neutral commissioners, not anybody with an economic relationship with the applicant. That's also addressed in the supplementary brief. There are also photos in the supplementary brief of the slideshow on Mr. Roshan's firm's website showing the yeshiva building that his firm designed. There were concessions made by the applicant to the neighbors. The applicant agreed to enclose a stairwell rather than leave it open, and the applicant agreed to limit fence height to 3 foot 6 inches, not to make it 6 feet or whatever. Although those concessions were made on the record, they never found their way into the commission's opinion. Everything the applicant originally asked for was granted, and the concessions the applicant agreed to make at the hearing were never made. I'd also like to point out that we've submitted today 4 copies of a letter from the Greater Wilshire Neighborhood Council in support of this appeal, based on the grounds we've provided for appeal. I cannot restate everything in the brief.
But you've got all the major points that you wanted to address.
Yes, but I do ask that you review the briefs.
Yes, what you can do is submit them to the clerk. We will review them before council, and any information you feel we need to see, you're more than welcome to share them with us. But just for the record, you should know that each one of our council officers reviews each case. We go through the analysis, and we also weigh all the facts you just presented as we deliberate and make our decisions. So I want to make sure that was clear. Thank you, sir.
One more point. We have submitted 35 letters from neighbors supporting the appeal. Most of these people are working jobs. They can't be here today. But there are 35 neighbors who sent in correspondence supporting the appeal.
And that will be in the file as well. Thank you, Mr. Byrne. We have Lloyd Sully.
Councilman Lloyd Solly, I'm an appellant and a member of the Neighborhood Community Group. I really don't have too much to add other than to reiterate what you've just heard Mr. Rabune say. We submitted this supplemental brief on the 25th. It was supposed to have been distributed to you a week ago in the package so that you could review it. Accompanying it were 100 pages of exhibits. Again, it covers a number of areas very specifically. Consistency with the general plan, consistency with municipal code regarding the issuance of conditional uses, its consistency not just with the general plan, but with the EIR that supports the general plan. It covers certainly what appears to be quite a significant violation of the ethics code. It covers in depth what we would claim amounts to an ongoing misrepresentation of some very specific and material facts as they're related to this project. This project was continually referred to as a school, as an existing school, as a school building, as a remodeling, as a renovation. Additionally, we've heard over and over that enrollment was not increasing, that enrollment was going to stay at 120. These are just materially incorrect. You'll see within the brief and within the supplementary evidence that we've submitted, this is a daycare facility. It has only ever been a daycare facility since it was issued its building permit and certificate of occupancy in 1980. It's licensed by the Department of Social Services Child Licensing Division for 76 kids, not 120. So again, not too much more to add. The ongoing violations, the subject property, I should add, today is under an order to comply because as we sit today here, 4 parking spaces are fenced and used as a playground. As are 18 parking spaces at 540 North La Brea, as are 7 parking spaces and a loading zone at 555 North La Brea, documented the abuses, now lawful, the applicant having heard from both Mr. Koretz's office and the Department of Building and Safety that should not be the case, that there should be vehicles there, continue. The images that you'll see in the exhibits are images since Building and Safety's inspection, images since Mr. Koretz's insertion of himself to try and resolve the matters, and images since the Planning Commission hearing on March the 11th. All of the violations at all 4 of the properties operated by the client.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Okay, only because of quorum issues, I don't want to lose quorum. We're going to ask the speakers to stick with 1 minute, but we do have, I believe, Mr. Wilson as the representative opposing the appeal.
Honorable Council Members, George Milson, Latham and Watkins, representing the school. Thank you very much. This school has been in this location for 30 years. The building that we're talking about today that's going to be demolished has been there for 30 years, and the school, the preschool, kindergarten has been there for 30 years. What we're seeking to do is essentially demolish an existing dilapidated building and replace it with a new building for these children. That's simply all that is going on. We appreciate the strong support we've had from the Planning Commission, unanimous recommendation, the recommendation of support from the hearing examiner and the Planning Department, and from the Council office. The Academy's request is essentially to continue a use that is there today, a pre-K kindergarten use, and replace the building, 3,700 square foot building, with an 8,400 square foot building, 8,300 square feet building, which is less than can be built on the lot as a single-family home. As part of the approval, we've requested 3 minor modifications. One is a slight modification on height to permit if I can finish, please, to permit a 33-foot building instead of a 30-foot building, a small reduction in side yard of 1 foot, and an increase in height on the one end of the property to protect the children, to a 6-foot fence rather than a 3-foot fence. No other changes are being requested. Nothing else is before you. No other facilities are before you. Importantly, this project will not result in an increase in enrollment of the school. There's about 120 children today. There will be 120 children tomorrow. Many of those children walk to school because many of these people, in fact, live in the community that is directly adjacent to it. And I'd like the members of the community to stand that are here today if I could. Thank you. These are members of this community and they're here to support it. I'm not going to have them talk today. I know that we have limited time. I believe this is a good proposal. It covers the issues that are important for the school. Let me respond to a couple of issues that were raised by the appellant. Number one, categorically, let me make clear that the Planning Commission President's firm had nothing to do with the design of this project, period. That is an outrageous allegation that has no support at all. Secondly, there is no general plan issue. As the staff indicated, this is consistent with the general plan. It is permitted by the general plan. There is no traffic issue. The Department of Transportation has reviewed the traffic. There is no traffic created by this existing school, and we're not fundamentally changing any enrollment. With respect to building safety, in fact did come out and find some issues with respect to parking at other facilities. Those have been corrected and remediated, and that has been resolved. There is an outstanding building and safety order with respect to this specific property, and that has been resolved by this proposal, which will add 12 new parking spaces on site. We respectfully ask your approval of this project. We think it's a great project. We're happy to have community members testify, or depending on what your preference is, we can ask them to stand down, but there are many people here who would like to speak. Thank you.
I appreciate that, and I first want to thank you for making the trip to City Hall. I know you've waited all day, and I really appreciate your patience, but I do have, I might be losing quorum, so I'd rather us get into the discussion. We've heard both from the appellants, from the applicant, and what I'd like to do is let you know that all the cards you submitted will be submitted for the record, so they will be on file. And if we can just hear from the council office at this time. I believe we have Christopher Kuntz.
Good afternoon, Chairman Reyes and members of the committee, and thank you for taking the time at this late hour. All of you know from your individual districts that schools are difficult. You can't build a school anywhere without there being some impact. You can't operate a school without there being people that are unhappy. But fundamentally, the reason we try to find solutions and make schools work is because they're an integral part of our communities. And you know that, and you've all struggled with that in your own districts. We're here asking that you oppose this appeal and let this school project go forward. It went through a careful review process. We held community meetings. There was the CPC hearing. It's been through a very thorough review. There have been changes to the project itself in terms of design, in terms of the look of the building and making it a more neighborhood-looking building. But at the heart of the appeal is this idea that under good planning, that a school can't go in our neighborhoods. This is a multifamily zone. The general plan acknowledges that schools with a conditional use can go in those locations and in fact are a community asset. And this school, which has had children who are now parents and sending their children to this school, is a community asset. There are students that walk to the school with their parents. There's students that are dropped off by car. They've done their best to address those issues. There are other schools immediately adjacent and in the area, and it's correct that there are issues on those, and we're working through them. And with any difficult issue, you know that it doesn't get corrected overnight. Dealing with the city family and dealing with an existing facility, those things don't get corrected overnight, but we're not done, and we are dedicated to addressing those compliance issues on those other properties. But what's in front of you is a chance to take a dilapidated facility that has not enough parking and replace it with a state-of-the-art facility that would have sufficient parking. It gets us forward. It does a positive thing. It is not only allowed under the general plan, but it's encouraged. It's a positive contribution, and we ask for your support.
Thank you, sir. Any questions from my colleagues for the staff? Linda, like to come on up? Any questions? Again, I want to thank everyone that came. We will read your name into the record. It will be part of the record before the council, but I'm really racing against time. And I have one more item to cover. Any questions from Linda in terms of this issue? None? Do we have an action, a recommended action for this committee? I think that this closes public comment. I want to thank both the parties for giving us their point of view, and any discussion on this item?
No, just like to move that we deny the appeal and approve the project's environmental clearance.
Okay. Second, that'll be the action of this committee. Thank you very much. Okay, Roberto, item number 6.
Item 6, council members, is an appeal by Francine Eisenrad. It has to do with an action that was sustained by the South Valley APC as to a zoning administrator's granting the use and maintenance of a side yard for a multiple family building in CD5. And the zoning administrator is present.
Excuse me, Chairman Reyes, Terry Kaufman, Macias City Attorney's Office. I live in this neighborhood, so I need to recuse myself from this item.
You attended the community meetings too?
Do I
just
what?
kidding.
No,
Never mind.
no.
Okay. All right. So who's sitting in for our city attorney? Okay. So which city attorney will be advising us on this case? Do we have someone?
There isn't anyone else that could be here today. So.
Okay, we're going to fly solo. You better be good, Nick. You better be right on. Okay.
Nice.
We have our substitute.
Why don't you take a seat up here?
All right. All right, please.
Associate Zone Administrator Nicholas Brown, just so that you can get a sense of the degree of consideration that has been placed upon this project, I'd like to go through a chronology of events. It was in 2005 that the property was purchased by the applicant. At that time, it had 3 units. It was April 2008 that the Department of Building and Safety issued a permit for 4 units. It was November 2008 that the Deputy Advisory Agency approved the 4 units for a condo project. That was appealed to the Area Planning Commission. That determination was made January 2009. They denied the appeal, and they imposed a number of conditions that were not included in the Deputy Advisory Agency approval. One of the conditions was that there be a over-in-the-height fence. Therefore, the applicant in this case applied for a ZAA, Zone Administrator's Adjustment, for over-in-the-height fence. However, during that period of time, it was learned that Building Safety made an error in determining what the setbacks should be for the side yard. And instead of 5 feet as approved through the building permit, I meant to say instead of 7.5 feet, what was required by code, Building Safety approved 5 feet. So what was before me was the reduction in the side yards as well as the over-in-the-height fence. I approved the 2, reduction of side yards and over-in-the-height fence, and I imposed additional conditions to help resolve some of the issues that were presented by the appellant. That was appealed to the Area Planning Commission, and on March 2010, the APC denied the appeal and imposed more conditions. Interestingly, in this case, they not only imposed conditions on what was truly within their authority, meaning the over-in-the-height fence and the 2.5 feet in the side yard, but with the permission of the applicant, the APC actually reached back to their prior decision and modified some of those conditions, but that was with the approval of the applicant, and that was to address some of the issues that were later learned to how to resolve some of the impacts. What you see before you is an appeal of the categorical exemption. It was just several years ago that changes were made in the state law, that's Public Resources Code 21167B, or I meant to say D, that allowed the appeal of any environmental clearance that was not approved by the legislative body can be appealed to the legislative body. So what you have before you is an appeal of the categorical exemption. What has been stated in the appeal is, number 1, that we did not apply the appropriate environmental clearance, the CE. I would like to read the actual clearance for the record. It's Class 5, Category 10, which states, minor area variances, building location,
configuration variances, yard variances, or slight modifications that do not result in any change in the land use or additional dwelling units. At the time of adopting that environmental clearance, the building was already built, the Deputy Advisory Agency has already approved the case, and the appeal body, APC, has denied the appeals and made additional modifications to the conditions of the DAA. The other contention of the appellant is that there is a policy within the department that if there is more than, and the term that is used in the appeal letter, if there is more than one deviation, that there shall be a environmental clearance, that's a E for an MND. The term is not deviation. What she is referring to is the fact that under a ZAA, Zone Administrator Adjustment, there's two actions. No, our policy is if there's any more than two discretionary actions. That means if it's a ZAA with a CU, conditional use, or a ZA with another discretionary action, we then look at imposing the additional environmental clearance and we don't give it a CE. So there is a policy, but the appellant has it wrong. It's not the deviations, it's discretionary actions. The last item that I would like to address is that she believes that through this process, the CE did not look at the adverse impacts, the impact of light, air, of aesthetics. However, if you look at the record, every single public hearing, four altogether, we looked at those issues and we dealt with what we would consider are the land use interface problems. That's where you have a multiple family dwelling right next to a single family. We went beyond the code to deal with the issues that were presented. And therefore, I would recommend that the action before the Plum Committee should be to deny the appeal.
Thank you, sir. Let's hear from the appellant. On record, please. We have with us Francine Eisenrod. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Chairman Reyes and Honorable Plum Committee members. My name is Francine Eisenrod, and I am the homeowner who lives in the single-family home that abuts the subject property to the south. Let me begin by stating at the onset, which is probably very obvious to you at this point, I am not a land use attorney, and I am not a developer. I am merely a homeowner, and I have lived in my home for the past 20 years. For the past over 2 years, we have been engaged in a very unfortunate dispute with the subject property developers. Basic tenets of law and civility were ignored. The situation was made even more difficult by virtue of the fact that the city did not adhere to their own rules, regulations, and protocols. The categorical exemption on the subject property was issued on September 10, 2007. Land use attorneys may argue that this was an appropriate designation. However, what we know and can agree upon at this point in time is the fact that this development has had a series of errors and oversights throughout its approval process, plan checks, and inspections. We all know and can agree upon the fact that there are outstanding environmental code violations and orders to comply issued by the Los Angeles Department of Building and Safety that have not been resolved to this date. There are 3 environmental concerns that I wish to bring you for your consideration. First of all, there is an outstanding cross-lot drainage code violation that was issued on this development December 16, 2008. At that time, the development was in its initial framing stage. An order to comply was issued on January 9, 2009, and I have a copy. I had just found that in the file. However, the city allowed this development to continue construction without addressing the cross-lot drainage violation, And to this date, the cross-lot drainage violation is still outstanding. And in the packet that I provided to you, you will see Exhibit 1. It has the correction notice. You're getting the order to comply. You will see the informational bulletin that's given by the Los Angeles Department of Building and Safety. And it is really very clear. It says that if you have any, it is clearly stated in the bulletin, any construction that blocks the natural drainage pattern shall be cause for non-issuance of a building permit. In the event such drainage is blocked by a lower lot owner, the upper property owner should notify the department for enforcement. A drainage easement from the adjoining property owner is required for cross-lot drainage, and the preferred system is drainage to the street. I made it very clear throughout the process that I did not want a drainage easement on my property. I was afraid that if there was a problem with the drainage on the subject property, the backup would put my home and my property in harm's way. I never signed or recorded a drainage easement for this to occur. However, illegal trespass repeatedly occurred onto my property so that illegally placed drains could be installed to provide cross-lot drainage. And in your packet that I provided, Exhibit 2 will have ample evidence. I had to put up security cameras, hoping it was going to be a deterrent. At the South Valley Area Planning Commission appeal hearing, the Associate Zoning Administrator, Mr. Brown, admonished the commission not to discuss the drainage matter since they did not have any authority over this matter. To my distress, I witnessed the commission writing a determination on this matter.
I need you to start concluding before we lose quorum.
Second issue is the side yard setback that was issued on only one side of the development, the south side, my side. The city, even knowing that they had a side yard setback issue abutting a busy alley, chose to ignore it. There is a preschool on one corner of the alley that has 120 students, ages 2 through 5, who go to school from 6:30 in the morning to 6:30 in the evening. And there's another business parallel to this, a thriving business that has access once again in the alleyway. I believe that an objective look to this code requirement is warranted. People may say that there's only a side yard issue to the south, which has been mitigated. I would hope that a second look might determine that there is in fact an outstanding side yard issue to the north. My last issue is a concern regarding my environmental health concern on the elevated walkway that was put in. They changed the grade from natural grade to 6 feet up, circumventing the queue condition on this property. What happens is that now I have an elevated walkway on the property line, and when gardeners come to blow off the dirt and debris, it's at the same level as my windows. So all of the dirt and debris now, which is 5 feet from my side, my house, goes into my windows. I consider that to be an unfortunate environmental occurrence from the manner in which the city allowed the circumvention of a queue condition. In conclusion, I want to make it very clear that contrary to the way the developer or their land use attorney wishes to portray me, it is not my intent and never has been my intent to delay the project. The delays occurred because these multiple errors were discovered after the fact. I really don't understand why so many errors were made on this development and why it took so long for these errors to come to light. However, please know I had nothing to do with any of these decisions or with any of these errors. I am truly the innocent party. I look to you, members of the Plum Committee, knowing that you deal with far bigger issues than this one, but to me, this is huge. This is an important environmental issue that has significant environmental impact to my property, and I believe that this is an important precedent-setting decision that will affect others as well. Please address these concerns in a manner that ensures the integrity of the city process in relation to a homeowner that has brought forth legitimate environmental concerns. And please, I am hoping that especially the cross-lot drainage issue that has to be resolved correctly before a certificate of occupancy is issued on this development. Thank you very much for your consideration.
Thank you, Ms. Eisenberg. We have with us Fred Gaines and Philip Tiberi.
Mr. Chairman, honorable members, Fred Gaines of the law offices of Gaines and Stacy. On behalf of the property owners, the item before you is a technical one, whether or not the categorical exemption that was granted by the zoning administrator in the South Valley Area Planning Commission is correct in this case. This is not an opportunity to re-argue the case. And the rule before you, the zoning administrator gave you what that exemption covers. It covers side yard modifications. So then you look to see, does it fall into an exception to the exemption? It clearly falls in the exemption. There's no argument. So the question is does it fall into an exception of the exemption? The exceptions are projects that may impact environmental resources of hazardous or critical concern, cumulative impact, significant effects, scenic highways, hazardous waste sites, or historical resources. And so you'd have to make a finding that substantial evidence shows that it falls into the exception to the exemption. And it goes further than that, because what the law says is that once the categorical exemption is adopted, the burden is on the appellant to show that substantial evidence supports that one of the exceptions apply. That is just simply not the case here. We have, there is no substantial evidence in front of you that any of these exceptions apply. Your commission properly, your staff and your commission properly adopted a categorical exemption. You have to remember, this is a project that was by right in every way, the number of units, the height, and what happened was it was built with less than the required side yard by error, including fully plan checked, inspected, and approved, and after the fact we went in for a 2.5-foot side yard. So now you should know that, so this is not an opportunity to go through the same issues that you heard today that your commission previously heard. You should know that the commission, despite the fact that there wasn't an environmental review, there was an exemption, still went through and made a decision that included a laundry list of mitigations that were both offered by the applicant and asked for by the appellant, including a higher wall, landscaping, reduction of lighting, all to mitigate potential impacts, despite the fact that there wasn't a environmental review because one wasn't required. So these issues were not ignored with regard to drainage, with regard to the elevated walkway, the issues you heard. We have conditions of approval already adopted and made
So when
final.
there is a person who's cleaning the driveway and they're using the blower, which is illegal in and of itself, but is it still going her window?
In fact, no, because now a fence has been put on top of. She used to have a wall with an open railing that faced her. It's been made a solid wall.
Okay.
So she doesn't see it, and nothing comes her way. So these kinds of issues have been addressed, but she does not met her burden in terms of requiring a categorical exemption.
Okay.
You should also know that she's already filed a lawsuit against the city and us, claiming that a full environmental impact report should be done. So this issue, should the lawsuit be pursued, will be adjudicated as to whether or not the categorical exemption was correct or not. But we ask that you find that she has not met her burden, that the categorical exemption is a correct determination in this case, as found by your staff and your commission, and that the appeal be denied. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Philip Tiberi?
Honorable Chairman Reyes and Plum Committee members, I have a correspondence on behalf of, submitted by Sherman Oaks Homeowners Association. May I give a copy?
That's it. Just have to take an action. Please conclude.
Thank you. Dear Chairman Reyes and Honorable Plum Committee members, Sherman Oaks Homeowners Association represents the interests of thousands of Sherman Oaks residents. Many of our members are property owners with a direct interest in the outcome of this file. Accordingly, our initial primary objective about this land issue was the careless disregard the City of Los Angeles had shown for upholding the characterization of the developed property adjacent to Francine Eisenrod's residence. The subject property was zoned QRD3-1 for a reason, to prevent overdevelopment of all properties abutting the south of the Ventura Boulevard Alley as established by Ordinance 164341, effective February 28, 1989. Instead, a dangerous land use precedent has been established by allowing the construction of this massive and intrusive complex, allowing the developer to elevate the natural grade to 6 feet above natural grade along the mutual property line between two different zoned properties, QRD3-1 and R1, may have served the developer well, but in effect destroyed the privacy, safety, and security of Ms. Eisenrod's single-family home. Her property value has plummeted along with her quality of life. It is important to understand that there are many older apartment buildings in the QRD3-1 zone facing the alley, parallel 1 block south of Ventura Boulevard, which are also immediately adjacent to R1 lots. These lots exist for approximately a 1-mile stretch from Nagel Avenue easterly to Hazeltine Avenue westerly. The potential for future redevelopment of these QRD3-1 lots to condominiums is high. Unfortunately, we are now aware that the City of Los Angeles carelessly ignored code requirements and allowed this development to be fully constructed with outstanding code violations. The outstanding cross-lot drainage code violation is an important and significant environmental concern. The side yard setback miscalculation on the north side of the development abuts to a busy alley and is an important and significant environmental concern.
We have your letter, and I think you got to the gist of the letter too, so we have it in front of us.
Thank you, Council.
Thank you, sir. Let the staff come on up to the microphone, please. I understand what's before us. It's a technical issue, but the APC's decision, as it went to the mitigation, did address Ms. Eisenrod's concerns as to the impact on her property.
Could I hear the last part of that again?
The impact on her property. Did the APC report and the recommendation address the concerns that we heard today in committee?
Yes, the APC heard this matter twice on appeal and addressed the issues of the appellant. The zoning administrator heard the same issues and addressed them. We have addressed them a number of times.
Okay, and the council office at that time, what was their position?
Well, I believe the council office may be here. The council office at the last hearing of the APC offered a recommendation of how to provide additional mitigation measures. I don't believe the APC went with that suggestion. I don't know where the council office is at this time.
Well, they're not here at this moment, I don't believe. Are they here, council office? Come on up. We didn't see your card, and give us your name and your position, please.
I apologize for that. Sean Bayless, Councilmember Paul Koretz, Planning and Land Use Deputy. We've been involved with this project for quite a while, probably 9 or 10 months at this point, and have accompanied both the ZA and the
Can you speak into the microphone? There you go.
South Valley Area Planning Commission hearing, and have fought with Ms. Eisenrod to try to get as many mitigations as possible for this project, knowing the difficulties with a project that's 100% complete, and requesting a variance after the fact. There was a litany of mitigations requested, ranging from smaller windows, which we didn't get all of, to the side walkway that's been discussed a few times being removed, or is a fence sufficient? So we have discussed on many occasions the mitigations. Mrs. Eisenrod did not get all the mitigations that were requested. The council office requested mitigations that weren't given. But the mitigation requests have been addressed several times, and many mitigations, and I would say most of the mitigations that have been given were to address the concerns of the side neighbor.
So your office is recommending to deny the appeal with all the conditions that have been provided?
Well, it's definitely a technical issue with regards to the environmental being sufficient or not. So it comes down to a policy of the planning department, and I think Mr. Brown can speak, has done a good job at articulating the policy of that. And we're dealing with a very confined issue, and that is, was the CE that was issued for this project sufficient, or was there a requirement for a mitigated negative declaration or something even higher? That threshold does not appear to have been reached or breached, but I would allow the planning department to articulate their policy and their thoughts on that.
Mr. Brown? I think you just need to repeat what you started off with.
Earlier in the presentation, I did read to you the actual exemption that was used, and that was to clarify that we correctly used the exemption. I also identified that we do have a policy, but that a policy does not apply in this case. This is two deviations, not two discretionary actions. And if I may note, let me give you an example of a case that is a CE. A ZAD for a hillside case, zone administrative determination, that has a ZAA for a setback does not require an M&D. So if you put that into context, this project compared to a hillside case that has a reduced setback, we don't require an M&D. Unless, of course, as Mr. Gaines said, it's one of those exceptions. So I only can repeat what I said earlier, that this is proper.
The recommendation from the staff, as it comes to us from the South Valley Planning Commission, is to deny the appeal?
Correct.
Do we have a motion?
Second.
That'll be a second? Yes? That'll be the action of this committee. Okay, Roberto, thank you. What's left?
There's item 8. I don't think there's a report and public comment.
We do have one card. Mr. Reyes?
Yes. Chairman Reyes, Mr. Krikorian, I just wanted to again make a pitch. Mr. Krikorian made a motion along with Mr. Koretz to have your committee evaluate the SB 1818 protocol, particularly as it relates to concessions, incentives, whether or not there should be an economic component to it. Again, I would recommend for everybody's review and consideration Vince Bartoni's article about SB 1818. I think it was March of 05, 06, and that obviously predated when the city undertook the policy. But we really do need to do that. Mr. Huizar introduced a motion that followed up on previous council motions that were passed in February of 08 that asked the planning department to give the policymakers the data, for example, on how much affordable housing has been destroyed versus gained through the implementation of the SB 1818 ordinance was passed by the city. We need a discussion. The people need a discussion, Mr. Reyes. They really do. And I know, that there's a certain proprietary aspect to what you got to do and you have your priorities, but respectfully, I'm asking again that at some point, sooner than later, maybe after you come back from recess, that you schedule a hearing on Mr. Krikorian and Mr. Koretz's motion, and at the same time, we ask the planning department with the new planning director, with whom I've had these discussions before, and Vince knows it because I've had the discussions with him also, that we be able to get the data so that the policymakers can get at what they need to do to evaluate whether or not what you did is working and whether or not what you did is not working and how we can make it better, because the ultimate goal has to be to get affordable housing for the people of the city, and we don't have a policy in that regard. We need it. You need the data, and I think the motions that were put forward by Mr. Krikorian and Mr. Koretz will get us there. In addition, one last comment, TOPA, Tenant Opportunity to Purchase Act. This is part of this evaluation because I see TOPA as a means of trying to unite the city. This gives tenants a right of first refusal to be able to buy these buildings. Hopefully, we can get to where we want to go.
Thank you, Mr. Reyes. Thank you very much. See no one else? This meeting is adjourned.